The verb tener in Spanish means to have, and it's actually a handy verb to use both in English and Spanish, but its concept is a bit tricky to use in Spanish, and in this video, I'll explain this verb as efficiently as possible. In English, the syntax of to have is easy to remember because have stays have for 5 pronouns and only changes to has in the he, she, it pronoun so that it sounds better for these pronouns. Like I said in my ir video, the verb tener likewise has tricky uses that are not that complicated. With ir, there's a big difference between saying to go and to go to. To go means to go somewhere in general, whereas to go to indicates that one will do something in the near future. The verb to have, both in English and Spanish, has the same concept of to have and to have to. To have indicates that one owns or possesses something, whereas to have to demonstrates that one has to do something in the close future. For instance, I can say a sentence like, I have a dog, which doesn't use the preposition to because I literally own something, but on the other hand, I can say I have to leave, which uses the preposition to because it indicates an action that will be done by me in the close future, with the addition of using an infinitive, leave, after to. And in Spanish, the verb tener works the same exact way with a bit more variety. At first, the verb tener is actually a stem changing verb, meaning that you have to change the stem of the verb to make it sound better when the word is said. Just like with the verb poder, the stem changing rule will only apply in the tu, él, and ellos pronouns. In this case, the verb tener falls into the to ie category, meaning that you take te and change it to tie, and this stem will only apply in the tu, él, and ellos pronouns. Nosotros and vosotros will not use the stem changing rule because Spanish says that these words sound good enough when they're normally said. The ending of all conjugations perfectly follows the syntax of verbs ending in er, but the trickiest thing to remember with the conjugations of tener is that the yo pronoun is also irregular. By technicality, you would want to say yo tieno, but Spanish says that this word sounds bad when said, so instead, you would say tengo. Yo tengo means I have, and that's the syntax of the yo pronoun being irregular. Tú tienes, you have, él tiene, he has, nosotros tenemos, we have, vosotros tenéis, y'all have, and ellos tienen, they have. With the verb tener, I recommend that you focus on all pronouns except vosotros because the sentences that you can make with them are very useful. Just like I said in the beginning of the video, there's a big difference between using to have as to have and to have to. To have indicates that one possesses something, like I have a dog, and to have to means that one has to do something, such as I have to leave, following an infinitive after the preposition to. Both of these sentences work the same exact way in Spanish, but there's one slight difference that many people, especially students, fail to acknowledge, and that is the preposition to. You might remember me saying that with the verb ir, you'll need to put the preposition a after a conjugation of ir, like yo voy a la escuela. I'm going to the school, which uses a as to. With the verb tener, you might think to similarly use the preposition a, such as yo tengo a salir, I have to leave, but this would be wrong in Spanish. What you instead have to do is instead of using the preposition a, you have to use que as to. Instead of saying yo tengo a salir, you would say yo tengo que salir, which would mean I have to leave. I literally don't know why Spanish does that, but I do know that yo tengo que, I have to, indicates a modern meaning like I must, rather than I have to. So whenever you say yo tengo que salir, you're basically saying I have to leave or I must leave. And the same principle applies to any pronoun you want to use. With the verb tener, you have to use que as to in order to indicate something that you have to do. With the verb ir, you have to use the preposition a as to in order to indicate something that you're going to do. In English, you can say I have to do my homework or I'm going to do my homework, and in both phrases, the preposition to stays to. However, if you want to say these phrases in Spanish, you will say yo tengo que hacer mi tarea or yo voy a hacer mi tarea. And as you can see, Spanish uses que as the preposition to with the verb tener and a as the preposition to with the verb ir. In English, it stays the same, but in Spanish, it changes. And the amazing and useful part about phrases like this is that if you forget how to conjugate one of these verbs, you can always refer to the other one to express the same sentence. And that's actually a very skillful hack to remember whenever you speak Spanish. Just know that if you see que after a conjugation of tener, it means to have to. And if you see an a after a conjugation of ir, it means to go to. If you want to say a sentence like you have to pay, you will say tú tienes que pagar, using the que preposition. If you want to say he has a cat, you will say él tiene un gato, without adding the preposition que. If you want to say we have a class tomorrow, you'll say nosotros tenemos una clase mañana. If you want to say they have to read the books, you'll say ellos tienen que leer los libros. In case you want to practice with more examples, I recommend that you also say these sentences using the verb ir so that you know to use the preposition a with ir and que with tener. The more you try this concept, the faster you'll get it, especially when you start generating examples on your own. So overall, the verb tener is a very useful verb in Spanish, both in terms of possession and future actions. Before I end the video, I would actually like to cover one last concept with the verb tener, and that's something something that's not very practical to use, but it's something very important to know. And that is that the verb tener can sometimes express sentences with beings as in to be. You might remember my videos where I talked about the verbs ser and estar, both of which express permanent and temporary states of being, and while I did those videos, there was something very specific I did not mention in both of those videos, such as expressions with age, temperature, hunger, and maybe a few more. As a reference, consider these phrases in English. I am 19 years old, I am cold, and I'm hungry. If I were to tell you to say these phrases in Spanish, you would probably say something like yo soy 19 años, yo estoy frío, and yo estoy hambre. And that's if you used ser and estar correctly. Some of you might make arguments that using ser and estar is the right way to go, because by saying yo soy 19 años, I'm factually stating this about myself, which is why ser is used. And for phrases like estoy frío or estoy hambre, I'm using estar because I'm indicating that I'm feeling cold or hungry right now, and my feeling will change in the future. As crazy as it sounds, Spanish says that you cannot use the verbs ser and estar because these are expressions that indicate having a fact about oneself rather than factually being that oneself. Instead of using soy or estoy with these expressions, you will need to use tener, and in this case, yo tengo. Instead of saying estoy 19 años, you'll say tengo 19 años because actually, I'm indicating that I have the age of 19 rather than me being 19. By saying tengo frío or tengo hambre, I'm indicating that I have a feeling of cold and I have a feeling of hunger. These expressions technically are not permanent nor temporary, which doesn't allow you to use the verb ser or estar. So instead, you have these feelings rather than being in these feelings. Of course, tener uses other feelings like these ones, but they're not as important as the other ones in conversation. And the same concept applies to any pronouns you want to use. This has been the verb tener in Spanish. Thank you for watching this video, and hopefully I made your learning just a bit simpler.